Ladies and gentlemen, I have a notepad here for the description of this show, and I want to make sure that I don't leave out the stuff that's normally there. So it's normally full of hashtags of all the different styles of music that I make here in the Vault of Doom. And my name is Mickey GemInEye, but there's going to be some more names here that I'm going to be just saying rest in peace to, happy birthday to, and I'm not going to give any names on the shout outs. I just want to give right off the bat shout out new subs. The new subscriptions on my YouTube, the official Mickey GemInEye YouTube channel, are going to be shouted out to right now. I'm shouting out to you. Thank you for your new subscriptions and keeping the momentum that I have going with this episode here, as I wanted to make it as brief as possible, considering you might be just starting a new podcast right now. And if that's the case, some of you might be doing it because you want to make a longevity goal, your goal, and some of you might be doing it because you haven't thought that much far through and you're just kind of experimenting or something like that. This step-by-step and tips from an experienced podcaster, me, that I wrote in the notes right here, is really simply put just like this. Start with your context. I'm making a podcast about horses because I'm a horse trainer. And then your contrast. I'm contrasting it to other podcasts that are about horses and horse trainers, and I'm contrasting it to other horse trainers in my community, or in my physical community or my digital community. Make sure you specify those two things. There just seems to be a very thin line between those two things nowadays. As for the actual step-by-steps, there's not much of a step-by-step, except for step one was what I just said, context and contrast. Step two is get going on all of your channels. Get going on all of your channels as fast as you can on that, as you are going to run into a lot of changes. You're going to run into a lot of ways that you want to change it, and the way that it evolves and expands and becomes and grows into becoming a part of your life, that if you choose to stick with being a podcaster, you'll find it's actually all not that much different than most jobs. As I have been doing this for enough time to speak on it, I've found myself falling in and out of being a podcaster, and certainly am not very nice to myself on how I feel about my own podcast and how I handle doing my own podcast, considering nothing at all. No consideration whatsoever as to what that is. I certainly have to emphasize that. As a side note, stop at nothing if you have a goal of making a podcast. That means haters online, haters in real life. That means discouraged and feeling inferior from other podcasts or other podcasters. That means literally stop at nothing to achieve your goal. And that's just a side note, because that's not an actual step. A practical step towards that, applying that, what I just said, into making your podcast a reality, is the getting started on all the digital stuff and get started on all the physical stuff, the environment, atmosphere, and ambiance that you want to create in your space with. Maybe you're a minimalist kind of person and a reduce, reuse, recycle kind of person, and you want to have that be your thing. make sure however you acquire all of your resources and tools to create your stuff, you're willing to back it up and reference to it later. And that means shout outs to people that gave you gifts, or at the appropriate time, or if you run a comedy podcast, an actual comedy podcast where you are actually have it listed as comedy, or something like that, and that's what you want to do. Now, essentially, nobody wants to make comedy, and essentially that whole fucking domain right there is free game, open range for everybody to literally just shit on your doorstep. But that does not mean that you can't keep these things in mind, be aware of it, and consider it as a possibility until it is literally out of the question. Like me, for example, it is literally out of the question for me to run any kind of comedy thing whatsoever. As you can see, I have on some of my previous videos some things that have been intentionally comedy. That, for the time being, was my ammunition against those demons, so to speak. And it still seems to be just kind of like a loaded up in the chamber sort of thing for me in case I run into any more problems. But it's no good. That's no good. It's expired. It's no good. Not I, Popeye. Sorry, not a tragic comedy. This is not Gaudier's Faust, and we're running a fucking metal podcast over here, making some metal music. Me, myself, and I, of course. As for the rest of the shit that you want to make sure you do on your step-by-step, keep a good balance in your like putting the fucking phone down, turning the thing off from time to time, actually getting into, whatever is your spirituality, whatever, find that, make that your grounding, your anchor. For me, what anchors me through all this madness is I can always reference back to these years later, I'll look at all this and go, what a bunch of chaos. And then I'll say to myself, oh yeah, I even made a podcast that one time during all that chaos where I said to myself, well, amidst all that chaos, my anchor was making chaotic music, so they complemented each other very well, and it went together quite delicious, quite delectably. As I review my podcast very seldom, and when I do review my podcasts, I'm quite pleased. So that's something I want to add in as a side note as well, not an official step, is pay attention to what you're broadcasting and what you're posting, and be willing to change and possibly even monitor and keep record personally of when you review your own stuff. So whatever else is going to be considered bad for business in this episode, or whatever else might keep web developers or any of those trees that are around here that have ears growing out of them, that might have to be on edge, sitting on their seat, biting their fingernails if I'm going to say something else that's bad for business. So far, I haven't really said anything that's bad for business. But beware, don't piss me off. As for the other stuff, like that's step by step, you should certainly make sure that you have that balance going on between when you put the stuff down. Creating a schedule is not all that important, I've found, for sure. But it's all of these things, all of this stuff is what you have to work out for yourself and find out for yourself of what really is what works best for you. As I seem to find that myself, that I guess that I like to think that I have this whole thing worked out to a T, and then it come to find out I have to be actually pretty flexible with my frequency of posting, frequency of listening, and even just thinking about it at all. Like literally, even just thinking about my podcast at all is something that I personally can't allow it to invade into my personal life. At least at least not willingly. Like, it just seems stupid to me to do that. But if it does bleed in and seep in there somewhere, I don't care. My tactic is I don't care. You could start taking notes now. You could start busting out your pen and pad or your notepad application. Start taking notes now. When my podcast and then the non-seriousness of it and the not needing to be professional right off the bat about it is bleeding into my personal life or something, where people refer to me as a podcaster, or I mention my podcast and then am booted from a Twitch stream or something like that. Those kind of things. My tactic is I just let it go, clean it up later, and then everything else can just work itself out. But it's for sure that if you've been doing this as long as I've been doing it, you should have something of a better following than I do. And I've done a shitload of episodes before this, so there's a lot of that already leaked before getting to this point. Though I am treating that the same way, that's not okay for me. I can't let that one go. I have to, with that, stick with the notes that I have right now, basically power through, get to the end of it, and I also, specifically for me, not be so confident that I'm going to withstand the test of time, knowing that I'm going to withstand the test of time and get through this dark space that I'm in and this renaissance of the life of my podcast, knowing I'm going to power through it and being confident that in that area is not happening, not working. So whatever else that it is, and then hearing myself either like as I'm talking or now, or like right now or later, and like how it sounds right now, and then trying to add in my feedback in that way, just as ineffective. But what I do need to do is reference to these episodes later, write stuff down in a notebook. I actually keep records of the stuff that, and this bad for business alert, warning, analytics and all that are going to tell you what you view and how your stuff's doing online. Any of the stuff and data and stuff and everything else that's not recorded online is recorded by me personally. And that information is either kept in a physical notebook that I go out to the store and I've planned ahead of time. I'm going to the store to purchase a notebook for lyrics on this day. And then the next day, I'm going to the store to purchase a notebook to keep chronicle of all the data, my own personal data analytics. And I don't even fucking look at the analytics until like literally last week. Like literally. I've seen analytics since like 2013, and it just never resonated with me, didn't mean anything to me. But at that point in time, I was taking my following for advantage, as I had hundreds of subscribers on that previous channel, thousands of views on every video, and I've removed that and have started fresh. This is my comeback on the podcast. Eventually I have to judge it myself a little bit and say, hey, how am I doing? But not really, though. I don't think I do. I think I need to leave that up to what people actually think. Give people the presentation, presenting people with the opportunity to be honest with themselves and be honest with me and experience that while you can, since clearly that's a dying art. As for the actual analytics that are on the thing, it's perfectly useful, just as useful as it was for me now. I had a bunch of followings and it didn't matter to me. Now I have no followings and the analytics is the only thing that matters. So what I have also written here is it's actually the last note here. I'll just skip to the last one here. Tips about your podcast and running your podcast from the email newsletters and the advice being given from the platforms themselves. I was literally bombarded with one as soon as I opened Spotify for podcasters the other day. It was like I had to click X to get out of so much fucking information. It's literally a class. It's like an entire school on how to fucking run your podcast, and that is so far beyond not okay that I can't even begin to fucking scratch the surface in talking about it. And no, I don't have the fucking jurisdiction there, as I can't write a fucking song about this shit. You know, those are my only two fucking options in reality. Write a fucking song about it, or write a fucking song about it, or to say something about it, like I am right now. I'm saying something about it right now. And I haven't branched off. I literally, what is that called? This is a good time for a commercial break, but I'm not going to take a commercial break right now. I'm just going to leave this space like, and this is with all the stuff I'm doing now. This is where I have to add in something that's going to be badass, and it's only going to last like 1 minute. So if that's where my show is, if that's where I'm at with things, well, okay, good. Alrighty then. Well, I know where I am now. So anyway, moving on then. I literally try rationalizing this complete absurdity by writing afterwards. I have not branched out from Spotify and YouTube or SoundCloud, so my advice is limited. And that's the result of literally the build-up to this moment, the build-up to this conversation, and the build-up to doing this episode about this, is that the fucking application bombards me with a school, an entire school, a whole school. It's not a quick read. I have done quick reads from Spotify. This is not a quick read. This is it takes all day to actually read it. It takes all day to read it, understand it. It takes all day to read it, understand it, remember it. It takes all day to read it, understand it, remember it, and retain it. And you might as well just go ahead and be super disappointed right now that I'm not going to fucking take in even more time explaining how much time that this thing takes to fucking add something in that's literally just a fucking of what I'm thinking about right now, of an Irish folk song about time. And like, that used to be creativity. Whether all that's changing right now or not, I don't fucking know. But I don't run a show here to sit and debate whether things are the opposite or the other under a fucking unannounced context. Whether things are this and that or whatever is gonna have the title of, this is Greek mythology episode, the beer episode where we talked about beer for like 5 seconds, and then the fucking the Kernounos episode, or the cornucopia episode where I talked about Kernounos for like 5 seconds. It's like, all right, I understand, guys. I'm doing very poor, and that's why my my views and my comments are not doing so good right now, and then all that stuff. What is good to get real, just literally jet propulsion right back on topic here of the analytics being useful is, oh, I see that the analytics is useful because I can look at I just looked at my demographics. Oh, I can look at the demographics of what country and what gender that my audience is, and then I can use that to craft the episode and accordingly. It's from where I sit, it's not that important. But, you know, I will allow a bunch of build up to discuss it to where you can hear me saying it or something like that. But actually, like, crafting an episode based on my demographics, like, as soon as I want to, not only is it not that important, it's not that effective, and it's not that is anything other than absolute foolishness. So the last episode, I did a whole bunch of talking in the last episode about the next episode. Now I'm on the next episode. Now I'm doing a whole bunch of talking about the last episode. Crime in Italy, is it, or could it ever be a better time for a commercial break? If I was, of course, ready for a commercial break. And since I'm not, this is your step-by-step, basically step 3. Step 1, context and contrast. Step 2, sticking with your goal. Create goals of some kind. So we're on step 3. All right, we'll hit step 3, go and take a commercial break before we lead up to step 4, because step 3 is, like I was saying, keep record yourself. Even if you need to, make a whole separate notebook of whatever extra set of analytics that you come up with of what was going on in your head at the time of doing your regular analytics. So you would have 2 chronicles. It would just be like Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2. Step 4 is where I will say, literally, just stick with your goals after you've created your goals. Considering that this show literally started out as strictly spirituality, and it was what's called channeling. It's what's called channeling in the world of like palm readers and stuff like that. And that's what I was doing, channeling. And then broadcasting my channeling on the channel. So what that has evolved into now is literally whatever I can provide of what's left of that part of me. As it's literally still very there and very much alive in me, but just has been evolved into something else. So having that be basically what is, practically speaking, any discussions about mythology, where you can revert back to history, where I've covered as far into the future as you could possibly. I've covered as far into the future as I can possibly get, without being completely ridiculous. And so history provides what you should do. It's just a matter of, me getting into some of these episodes and in the right timing. I seem to have some sort of relationship with timing that is just truly ineffable. Otherwise, I'd be some kind of Ivy League university professor. Could you imagine that? I don't know. I'm clean shaven. You can now, because I'm clean shaven maven. But not with that scruffy beard, even though probably a lot of Ivy League college professors. Anyway, what am I saying? What am I talking about? What am I saying? Ivy League professors. Those discussions need to start showing up pretty soon here on the show, on the roster, because there's a bunch of interesting topics I'm interested in talking about there, and it's on the previous theme song that it's the occasional mythos, and it didn't show up yet on this season. I haven't talked about the occasional mythos aside from my mentioning Women's History Month event that I created on my X profile, with one woman from metal music and one woman from mythology, ancient mythology. I think I kind of slipped off to the wayside over there for a little bit on the context of the show, and it was like me listening to a bunch of JRE and then just tailoring it after Joe Rogan's podcast, in the sense of the most simplest sense of that I wanted people to be on the show and just sit and chill and talk about whatever comes to mind. I don't know what other context that you could refer to his podcast as. That's all that it is. Like, I just has people on there that sit and chill and chat about whatever comes to mind for like 3 hours. And then I said to myself, well, hey, technically I already had a guest on my show and we were talking about the spiritual stuff, but that's where it evolved to after that. This is the incarnation after that. It's now become the combination of all those things, and it has become a hectic and tedious task to keep up with. The ideas that I come up with, pressing record when I on the spot, on the fly, when it's necessary, and then because that's an unrealistic completely totally unrealistic expectation, I'm just keeping going with it now, just for the sake of it's my goal now to just maintain and keep up with this impossible thing. Not that it's impossible, but this very difficult task, this very challenging task of maintaining this podcast is the goal in and of itself. I'm not too worried about my current experimental qualities of the musical project that I'm working on right now, but I am worried about like having it over with already. Like, just get it. It's got this current musical project, I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes, has 2 albums left and it's done. Then I can start working and focusing on a more specific genre of the next project, before adding in, of course, the other elements of the previous project into another new project. So it'll be just as difficult as maintaining this show. But for me to go this long without receiving any income from this or any feedback at all from this is the fuel for right now. Right now, that is what keeps me going. And that's pretty much probably what the only reason it's there for. The only thing that this kind of failure is here for is a stepping stone. Now I have conquered it. What's the next one? You know, just like I'm ready to get finished with this current musical project, get over with it already. Well, I'm done with I'm done with caring or not caring or everything in between. From nobody commenting, nobody sending me money in this. And what's the next one? You know, if it's a little scared or frightened or perturbed from me or discouraged or threatened or intimidated by me, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. As for the notes here, I have to say I was scrolling on my X and I found out that Molevolence's Brett Hoffman died at the age of 30-something. So rest in peace, Brett Hoffman, and happy birthday, Omens, the most recent album by Lamb of God. These other little notes here, these are just things you could read if you're on the screen, or if I happen to get this up on Spotify, you'll have to check it out on there too. Spotify's been pushing that they have everybody doing video podcasts on there, so it like saves me the time that I would have had to sit here and say that you could hear me on Spotify and see me on YouTube. So there's just another job lost. It's like a whole nother chunk of moment that like self-payment, self-checkout version of this. You know, self-payment, self-checkout. You don't need cashiers. You could fire cashiers now. Well, Spotify makes it so that you can upload videos to Spotify now. So you won't have to waste I don't need to waste a whole chunk of time, and they don't need to waste a whole chunk of a podcaster to sit and explain that to you. So anyway, that's where I'm at with things, and that's how I'm doing. But here's the other little notes that I had before I close down on this episode. The AI runs more than I'm comfortable with. Honestly, it's personal, and breaking out of that is obviously mingling with other podcasters. Doing so now, much different than it was before. I can't say I've ever mingled or met other podcasters. Strange. Anyway, moving on. Keeping my cool. Keep your cool is a pro tip from me personally. I'm telling you personally, keep your cool about all this stuff. And if you're starting up a new one, getting your setup physically all arranged, and then getting your online accounts all arranged, as you want your bank account attached to this stuff. As I do with mine. My bank account is attached to my Cash App, where if you send me money, I can go buy a bottle of whiskey, proper 12, and get fucked up that same day. Should be your motivation. Send me money. You also want to make sure you're balancing your consumption with your output, as I have been focusing on lately. I'm not sure if I've accomplished that yet, but I've been focusing on it lately. So the previous episode features this. It's a bonus episode on this season, probably bonus episode 1 or something. And if you talk about interesting topics that you both firsthand know about and learned about from online, well then talk about that, and then talk about what you like. And that's what Spotify was telling me to do. As for the getting in the way, stepping on toes, being bad for business stuff, I mean, that's a scary place to be on the fence of, which is where I am right now. I'm on the fence of that scary place to be. I'm not I'm sure what that means, but it definitely means it'll probably carry me on to the next stage of continuing to be on the fence of being bad for business, stepping on toes, and potentially talking shit about these email newsletters and tips of advice that these platforms give you to start your own podcast. Anyway, this has been episode 50 of the Vault of Doom podcast, and I am Mickey GemInEye, and this was episode 50 of the Vault of Doom podcast about starting a podcast. And on that note, guys, it's just take it for a grain of salt. In total, my advice is limited, other than the origin story of the podcast, which is inoculated in every single, basically episode on the whole thing. And you're 50 episodes behind if you just started joining me right now. So I'll see you next time.
Sure.